You're chairing the meeting.
Oh,
Well, there's no pressure.
okay. Okay, well, thank you everybody for being here for our admin and finance, meeting. We do roll call.
Sure, we may.
So Director Spardonish?
Here.
Here. What do I do?
Just the first item is,
Okay, so first item on the agenda, review of the strategic financial policies.
I'll be happy to kick that off.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So this committee typically reviews the strategic policies annually and may make recommendations for any necessary changes or updates to such policies. And just reattach them. I don't have a ton of I'll make this much bigger. I have some specific I have some items that I'll call to your attention for the second item, so we'll kind of pass through this first time, but these policies were first implemented back about 10 years ago, and they've been amended on several occasions, kind of expanded upon or whatever. They cover a number of areas of the financial management of the district, starting with capital assets and depreciation fund. We kind of use some terms interchangeably, but we established this asset replacement system that's associated with each account. And basically what this component or this section of the policies does is require that each fund make a contribution annually to the like amount of its depreciation calculation from the prior, most recently closed fiscal year that's been audited. And so these amounts, we present these amounts to this committee as a part of the budget planning, and then they're incorporated into the budget. It ensures that there's funding available to replace assets going forward. There is a tool here that if the depreciation, if this asset replacement fund were to associate with each of these funds get relatively high compared to the amount of assets that the district owns or has booked, again, associated with each fund, then the amounts would actually decline, but we're not nearly there. So I think this is working more or less okay. It's particularly you'll probably hear or know that in the fire fund, it's been the most challenging for two reasons. One, the fire fund had essentially no depreciation or a very small amount of money set aside before these policies were put in place. Two, they've got rapidly escalating assets. What used to cost $300,000 is now more than $1 million, and that's just over maybe in 10 years' time. So the cost of those assets have gone up rapidly. And then three, the replacement of assets are predictable, right? There's a rolling stock, like an engine, it's going to need to be replaced. It's not something that's buried, so it's something that everyone understands a little more clearly. And the fire fund's just more strapped financially, or the most obviously strapped fund, and so it's had the biggest challenge. But it absolutely needs significant balance in that account. This fund also assigns useful lives based on assets when they get booked. There have been a couple of minor changes to this also over the years, particularly with something on fire apparatus where the amount of time has been extended. So that's probably that's working pretty well in general, unless one of you or one of the committee members has questions on it. We have a reserve policy. This again was put in place originally back when the policies were first adopted, and it assigns a 25% reserve minimum to each, based on expenses, to each fund, and we incorporate that into the budget. Again, for the most part, everything's working pretty well with reserve policy. It essentially means that you've got some money kind of built in to handle an unplanned emergency. For example, for a few weeks there, it looked like the feed and grain fire might be really expensive for the district. And the question was, well, I know we're agreed to expend this fund, but where's it going to come from? It would have come from the reserve. And then the reserve, in order to be reserve next year, we probably would have had to pull money from that future fire operating fund. but essentially it's for unplanned emergencies. There's a portion related to debt service. There, for example, it's common to have, we have this with some debt service instruments where you have to have like a 1 year's payment set aside. We happen to have that with one of our loans from the state. It's like $58,000. It's just sort of parked in its own account, so to prove that we can make a debt service payment. There's a section on debt issuance and when it might be a good idea. This is not something that's really come up over the years. We did issue debt, not in a traditional way, for the East Side Force Main project. We borrowed some funds from ourselves, from the sewer fund, borrowed some water asset replacement money that we've since paid back to help make that work. And then we were in a very low interest loan through a revolving loan program through the state to pay for a portion of that cost. And then we received some grant funds as well and used some cash financing.
Where would we find information about what current debt the district holds?
In the financial statements,
Okay.
and it's really simple. Okay, the district really only has two forms of, there's liabilities book, but there's only really two forms of debt. One is this state revolving loan that's associated with the East Side Force Main project. And it's got like another maybe 18 years left or something.
Something like that.
Yeah, it's like 58,000 a year. It's a pretty small annual payment. That's the only debt that the district is formally attached to.
Got it.
However, we are also own or are obligated, I guess, maybe this is a better way of saying it, to make debt service payments associated with the Nacimiento pipeline project. And that debt was actually issued by this San Luis Obispo County Flood Control District, but our contract with the Flood Control District requires us to make debt service payments. And so that debt is also discussed in the district's financial statements. It's essentially an obligation, even though it's not held in our name. Everything else, we have other debt, but not in the traditional way, like we have pension debt,
Right.
essentially.
Right.
But there's a section on capital fees or obligations for new development. Essentially says the district will strive to ensure that new development covers its own costs. There's a section on budget controls, and this talks about the information that how department managers receive information that comes to the board through your treasury report, etc. We've added some sections to this area over the past few years as it dealt with commitments from the CFD funds. Again, the CFD began back in 2017, but there was really no money coming to the first 4 or 5 years, and then very small amounts for the next couple of years. And as properties that were annexed became developed, it became a more substantial funding source. This committee and ultimately the board made some decisions about obligating those funds, at least in the initial years. And they're primarily obligated to the fire. They're all obligated to the fire fund initially to cover the debt service associated with an engine that is not yet received, but we know is, I say debt service, I meant the depreciation costs associated with an engine. And then also just a commitment, because we know we've got some upcoming challenges with regard to meeting the fire department's, the fire fund's obligations. This is the section that I want to kind of come back to for the next item, this OPEB fund. If you don't mind,
Yeah.
just because this is an area that we anticipate making some changes on, although maybe not today. There's a section on deposits or liability accounts. We do have, we take and hold deposits for a few reasons. One, the common reasons are if somebody rents a room, usually the community center, they make a deposit and we hold those funds. One, to hold the room for them, and then two is it's kind of like a cleaning deposit, very similar to what you might think of when you when you make a deposit, when you rent a house or something. And then we return those funds, and so those are held. And then the second way is, for new development, we hold a deposit to bill against as we review plans and specifications and those kinds of things. And sometimes those can go on for quite a while. Like a project might start and go for several years. The district will hold those funds, bill against them, and have to maybe require additional funds to be deposited, et cetera. And then when the project's closed out, any remaining balance is refunded to the project. There's a discussion here on fund balance and what it is made up. What makes it up? It's not necessarily just cash at the time of the date. There's a reference to the purchasing policy, and this has been, you updated the purchasing policy just about maybe 7 or 8 months ago. So it's a reference to it here, and it's attached. Financial report, these are like, you'll receive audited financial statements. Well, and that's gonna be an item that comes before the board, hopefully in November. And we expect like the audit team to report to you perhaps in October, if we can get a date from them, this committee. Monthly treasurer's report, which you receive as a part of your regular board meeting packets and are approved each month. And then also in the budget control section, there's a reference to the administrative cost allocation. And this again is relatively just a couple of years old, this formula, this cost allocation formula. So this is essentially the district's strategic financial policies. And again, if there are sections or areas of concern, we'd be happy to, either look at or discuss, if the committee has suggestions for revisions, we'd be happy to, work with you to make those revisions and bring them forward so the board can consider them formally. And again, there's one area that I think warrants some particular discussion this year dealing with OPEB.
Yeah, I had a question on the administrative allocation, but just how it's calculated. I know it's based upon the actuals from the 2 years previously, but what is the actual methodology of gathering those figures?
Where do they come from?
Yeah.
They come from the audited financial statements.
But what is it based on?
Oh, the district's expenditures. In other words,
Just based on expenditure?
yes, with some exceptions. So for example, yeah, well, the expenditures from, so essentially this formula covers, it forms the basis for how the other funds pay their share of the administration fund.
Right.
And so let's take, for example, so we have a water fund, a sewer fund, a fire fund, Parks and Rec, et cetera. And so what this formula does is it says, okay, let's look at the most recent audited financial statements and look at the expenditures from that year. So for example, when we build the formula for the next budget, so it'll be fiscal year 26-27, it will be based on the audited financial statements from fiscal year 24-25.
Right.
So there's like a 2-year lag in how the calculations work, because that'll be the most recently audited available information. And we use all of the expenditures from each of the funds, again, with some exceptions, capitalized one-time items. So for example, if the fire fund were to buy a fire engine in a given year, that would be removed from that tabulation because it's essentially picked up in its asset replacement contributions each year.
Okay.
Later on.
Okay.
So it would be double counting it if you
Right,
use
right.
both. And then it would create big swings, right? If you spend $1 million 1 year, then the next, it's gonna lead to big swings in the admin allocation.
What about large, like, infrastructure projects?
Same thing,
Those are removed?
yes.
Okay.
So like a pipeline project or
Yeah.
something, yeah, a big well project. Those will be, those costs are picked up, but they're picked up indirectly through the asset replacement contribution. So those are part of the component of the expenditures. And so let's say you spend $1 million on a new well, and that's amortized over 40 years or 30 years, whatever it is. Those will be picked up when you make those, when the district makes its asset replacement contribution.
Depreciation expense.
Yeah, so that's what I was gonna actually ask about the asset replacement is, is part of the admin asset allocation. What's the reasoning behind that? Why is like purchasing, purchasing a well, or building a well or purchasing a fire truck goes into admin and these different funds have to pay for it?
Well, they don't really pay for admin, it's just part of the, the formula that's tabulating the cost.
Yeah,
And the
yeah, so
reason-
why is it in there? So for example, like I understand the fire truck, it's gonna be 80,000 a year, so on that 80,000, the fire fund's gonna have to pay another 20%, so it would be like another $8,000, $16,000. So it's like, I just don't understand
Doesn't-
why.
and so let me provide a little background. This is the second version of this report that we got from RGS, and
Yeah.
originally it was not included. We had excluded one-time expenses, and it was not included in the tabulation. But because when we started talking about what are the costs and obligations and whatnot, we looked particularly at our enterprise funds. They have much more significant asset replacement contribution amounts than, say, the fire fund. And so when we opted to include them, it actually saved the fire fund because its asset replacement contributions are much lower. So like in the sewer fund, for example, we're making like $500,000 a year asset replacement contributions
We took that out.
Took it
The
out.
fire fund would go more.
relative to the other funds.
Got it, okay.
So it was a way of actually reducing the obligation of the fire fund by
Yeah.
including those.
I'm just, I've never been a big fan of this formula here, and now, seeing, oh wait, they actually include asset replacement, because to me, it doesn't have anything to do with, and, I realize that you guys included to help the fire fund, but it just doesn't seem like it, has anything to do with, admin, so, I'm just thinking if there's another formula or another way out there that could be that we could use for calculation that could be a little bit more accurate. I know they said there are other possible formulas, but it may take too much of staff time to calculate things, right?
Yeah, so no, I mean, there are other, as a matter of fact, when we started down this road with RGS a few years ago, sort of in a consulting role, we talked about what are the pros and cons of, of looking at various sources. We took a cursory look at just employee count. We took a look at like, okay, what if we could go down the road of what some people might prefer to say a time and motion study, where you take the actual, time of the persons assigned to the admin fund and
Right.
track their costs like in 15-minute increments. And over the course of months or maybe even a year, and then utilize that. And in discussing with RGS, we talked about just our makeup, and the consultant person we would work with at the time, and I'm trying to, her name is on here. So,
Isn't it Mary?
yeah, it was Mary. Had suggested that we just, try to come up with something that's simple and that can be it's dynamic. And so this is what she had recommended. So yeah, there's been, at least at the board level, some concern about the fallout from adopting this, because it did alter we had kind of some fixed assumptions going previously that had been in place for a long time. And it caused, like, say, the fire fund's contribution to go up. I think there is, you could say, hey, I want to look at other options, let's do something else, and we could attempt to come up with another way. You might be even less happy with the end result. I just don't know. I don't know. I think that, when this first came about, I felt like it made sense. It was a big increase, I know, in some of the funds, but it kind of passed this sort of basic smell test. It also builds in the sort of automatic correcting. It's like, because it's dynamic and we're always using the latest data. If the district's operations were to change drastically going forward, for example, like we've talked about some wastewater commitments and obligations going up. Well, I mean, this system would pick that up over time and sort of, and be dynamic. And one of the challenges we have with the fire fund is over the past probably maybe decade or, 7 or 8 years, the fire fund is what's grown a ton in expenditures in relation to the other funds, but I'm not sure that's what should happen or should be expected to happen going forward when we have, significant projects anticipated in the wastewater side and on the water fund. And this formula will reflect that eventually, once those expenditures are made and obligations, both on the operating side and on the asset replacement. Once those assets are booked in the system, they'll trigger depreciation expenses, which will be picked up by the formula and cause those funds to pay more.
So what is the determination for whether or not an expenditure is removed from the calculation? In terms of like those sort of like outlier.
I think, didn't we take out the SAFER grant
Yes.
so we did that.
So does it come by the board? So the board makes a decision
Well,
per item
Uh,
or?
from the beginning, well, when this was first adopted, when we picked up asset replacement, we knew we had to deduct the one-time expenses, because otherwise you're double counting all.
One-time expenses of things like equipment.
Capital items,
Uh-huh.
not like a box of paper clips or
Right,
something.
yeah.
Not supplies. So, yeah, capitalized items.
Um,
There are a few other sort of accounting items. We have like a little worksheet that's some notes that because we were otherwise afraid of sort of double counting expenditures. Or, so I don't know how handy.
so like the Evers Park Improvement Plan. That is an investment we'll be making, but the cost associated with that would remain in the calculation and would be removed.
It will be in, it'll be in once it's booked as an asset. So let's say we finish the project and we spend $1 million on improvements.
Uh-huh.
When that becomes booked as an asset, when at the conclusion of its construction, it'll add to the depreciation for Evers Park.
Okay, right,
And then it'll be picked up on the asset replacement or depreciation expense side
through,
through this formula.
but under the park, under
Under
parks.
parks.
Okay.
Yeah, just to me, it just doesn't make sense why those items are happening allocation.
Yeah,
Well, it's an expense to each of those funds, a depreciation expense, and so you're kind of taking all of the expenses for those funds to come up with, a percentage for admin. I mean, if they weren't in there, the fire fund, it would be more
Yes.
money to them.
Yeah, it's just,
how do other, community services districts handle their admin costs?
So it's kind of a little bit all over the place in terms of, so one, lots of community service districts are much more simple than we are.
Right, yeah, we
Right, we have a lot of services and a lot of funds. Some CSDs have one fund, they're just like a water fund, they call their community service district, but they just operate a water system. Or maybe it's just a water and sewer system. So, locally, we're probably most like Cambria.
Yeah.
Where they have a multitude of services. And, we actually tried to reach out to Cambria to get a copy of their study or whatever they had used to develop it, and the person there couldn't locate what
And
it
they
was
get
based
ready
on.
To redo theirs or something.
So, but you can still you can see how the formula works. In
Right.
other words, it's not that dissimilar in terms of how the amount of, the percentage of the costs are assigned to various activities. They assign a portion of their admin costs to all of their funds. Like this does. They don't line up perfectly, but it's not particularly dissimilar in terms of the net effect. But we were unable to figure out how did they arrive at those figures.
Uh-huh.
They have had a lot of turnover, and their staff members are not aware of how it was originally arrived at. You thought they're gonna do it, they're gonna do it again? They're
Yeah,
gonna-
it might be complete. I could reach out to see. Chat to Denise and see if they have.
Yeah, an updated study or something.
Study.
Nobody does it just an equal amount.
So here's the thing,
Across the board.
is the reason for using a formula is to defend the Prop 218 process with regards to the enterprise fund. So it's, the district has a ton of discretion about how you spend tax dollars.
Mhm.
So your property tax dollars, you can pretty much spend the way you want. We can't give it, we can't be a gift of public funds, but you can say, hey, the fire fund's gonna cover all, or the tax dollars are gonna cover all the administration for the district, and that would be absolutely completely legal. But the opposite cannot, is not true. You cannot expend, enterprise fund proceeds, through ratepayer funds. They cannot be used to supplement or supplant, I guess that's tax services. So in other words, water fund proceeds or ratepayer proceeds from the water fund cannot be subsidizing the cost of providing fire services. That would invalidate the district's rate case, or it'd be a violation of Prop 218. So essentially, this kind of a formula, whether it's this or something else, is used to defend or ensure that that's not occurring, that we're not subsidizing non-ratepayer services or services that the rates are not intended to support with rates.
So even if we have like a general fund, where all the money goes into one fund and we call it general fund, the money from the ratepayers for water will not be able to put it in there?
Correct, yeah. So we do have a general, we call this, admin funds kind of like a general fund, but yes, you could, our structure is a little different, like say in the case of a general, like a city's general fund, those are tax proceeds only, the water fund and the sewer fund, the rates would always go there. And they would use something like this, a cost allocation plan, to cover the water and sewer rate supported portion or supported functions of the general fund, if you will, if it was a city council or whatnot.
I mean, I guess the other option would be to put all the property tax money, all the money that we could put it in one account, and then from there, spend it like based on, you set a budget and then you could spend it. How would, if we do such a thing, would that affect this?
It would, because our admin services fund or administration fund really works more like an internal service fund, where all of the expenses are tied to another functional area because it gets almost no direct funding.
Yes.
So it's in our case, so for example, you could do what you described, and what would happen is the property taxes would go into this general fund, and then you would budget your tax supported services out of the general fund. That would be like fire and parks and recreation. But the district has many years ago decided long ago to separately allocate them directly.
I mean, there used to be a admin for property
Yeah,
taxes.
there used to be a
wasn't it like a 10%,
small
right,
amount
or
of the
something
property
like
tax came to the
that
admin
just
fund.
went directly to admin.
And now it's effectively coming indirectly, right?
Yes.
With the fire department making its support, or Parks and Recreation making its contribution, it's indirectly pulling in those property tax revenues. So it's an imperfect arrangement. I guess I would argue that you could take a stab at something else. I don't know what the outcome would be. It will also be imperfect. It might be better. It might be more accurate, but it may not. It's still not going to be perfect. And I think one of the things to keep in mind is this system. Again, what I would caution us from getting away from is it's got a built-in self-correcting, because it's always just the latest data. It will evolve over time. It'll be dynamic, and there's value to that because of the district's operations change over time. This should, I guess, it will pick up those changes in expenditures, and that'll impact the contributions going forward. It's delayed. It's kind of like 2 years delay.
2 years delay.
Yeah,
That's the problem.
it's delayed, but what we had previously was the static assignment, and that I think was equally problematic because unless there's a mechanism to update it regularly, you could have significant changes in operations and it not reflect such. And that's probably what happened with the fire fund, right? We had this, relatively small fire expenditure going back, 25 years ago with mostly volunteers and for many years, just one employee. And so it made a small, like 10% contribution to the admin fund. And now it's really our biggest fund. It's our biggest fund in terms of number of employees and employment costs.
Okay, that was my only question. on the strategic or policy.
Okay, I'm gonna go back up to this one section here just to provide some history that's on this OPEB issue before we get into the, if it's okay, if we.
Yeah.
We
So-
do, item 2 now?
Item two,
Item two.
okay, item two. Get too far here. I did. So, just, by way of just some really big picture history here. For me, our agency, like many others, provides some benefits to employees after they retire. We do so in two ways. One, through a formal pension program, which has long been recognized, and we've been a part of PERS since the eighties, and that's always been on on local governments' financial statements, pension obligations, liabilities, et cetera. The district also provides benefits to employees when they retire through health insurance. And really, it's, in our case, it's somewhat distinctive in that there's kind of two tiers of this level of benefit. For employees hired prior to 2014, they receive essentially a like level of benefit as when they worked until they're age 65. And then at age 65, the value of that benefit goes down because they begin receiving Medicare, or their spouse begins to receive Medicare. And this, for employees who were hired after 2014, due to the district's contract with CalPERS for health insurance, we are obligated, if they take health insurance after retirement through the district, to pay what's known as the PEMCA minimum. It's an amount that changes annually. Right, this year, I believe it's $159 a month. So it's a lot lower than the full cost of health insurance. Nonetheless, there are a few people who have retired, who are eligible for that, have retired and have stayed on district health insurance, although fewer than if they were fully, if those costs were being funded in their entirety. So like back in the 80s and 90s, this was common, but financial statements didn't pick up this obligation. It was essentially just an understood but not reported on obligation. And I don't recall when the rules changed, sometime in the early 2000s, we began to have to report on what's known as OPEB, or other post-employment benefits, other meaning other than pension. And so since then, every local government is required to include in their financial statements this calculation of how much of a liability do these pension obligations, or non-pension OPEB obligations, in our case, health insurance only, represent. At the same time, health insurance, was maybe was relatively less expensive component, and has gone up, for many years, and has risen faster than the rate of inflation. Certainly in the last decade or two, really since I've been involved, this has always gone up more than seemingly more than the inflation has. It's a more rapidly rising cost. So for two reasons: one, we had to start including these calculations of this pension debt, and two, we, the district, up until about 5 years ago, were paying for these retiree costs as we go, pay as you go, essentially what it was. And so not only were we reporting on our financial statements the long-term liability of these costs, but it was impacting our annual budget because we were having to fund the retiree healthcare out of the current year's proceeds. So about 10 years ago, the district began researching best practices on how do we essentially save or prepay for these costs and get out of the pay-as-you-go model, knowing that this is going to become a bigger and bigger expense. So for example, just to illustrate, for this year, the 25-26 year, I believe it's about $225,000 in retirement medical costs. So, I mean, it's not insignificant. That's across all funds, but, and I think we have 13 persons on the 13 retirees. It's almost as many as we have active employees on medical insurance. So it's a pretty significant, it's a significant cost relative to the size of our district. So back 10 years ago or so, we began researching options, and the district decided to begin setting aside funds and invest in a trust. It happens to be administered through PERS. I call it the PERB OPEB trust, but it's actually got a more technical name through PERS. There are other vendors or other suppliers for these trusts. One of the things that initially our plan was to slowly increase these contributions until such point as they could sustain themselves and we would be quote unquote fully funded. And this policy that is written here started out saying for fiscal year 16-17, 1% contribution of each fund's OPEB allocation amount would be contributed, and then that would increase over time until it was fully funded. And then again, we had entered into this CERT CERBT program. I'll call that the OPEB trust. That's the term I use that's administered through CalPERS. And we had selected an investment strategy 2, which was like the middle. There were 3 strategies available: more conservative, middle of the road, and more aggressive. And we chose at the time the sort of middle of the road strategy. And we had calculated what the OPEB liabilities were by fund, and they're actually listed in this document that date back to 2015. At the time we invested in the trust, there were a few years that followed where there was some excess or some funding available beyond what the current year's expenditures were. And so the district board decided to take those excess funds, as surplus, if you will, but funds beyond what was necessary that year, and then make a voluntary or investment larger than this policy required to boost the value of those trust assets to get us off pay-as-you-go sooner. And so we did that for several years. So we kind of skipped through this policy kind of quickly. We kind of, in just about 3 or 4 years, instead of taking maybe 10 or 20 years to pay into the trust, we accomplished it all pretty quickly, put the money in the trust because it was available out of the district's current assets, and considered ourselves fully funded. And so this policy has really not been in place for about 5 or 6 years because we haven't opted to make additional contributions, and we thought we were quote unquote fully funded. And I want to just stop for a second and say there's some risk about overfunding the trust. A trust the pension trust, just like pension, the OPEB trust once funds are put into that trust, they're not liquid any longer. They can only be used for specified purposes, hence the word trust. And so in this case, it's just for retiree medical care. Now there is some flexibility about how we can take money out of it. We've been in the last 3 years just taking funds out that match our contribution or our cost for this retiree medical. I think that's called explicit subsidy. So that's the direct cost. There is also a way of getting some additional funds, and it's a relatively small additional amount known as implicit subsidy, and the trust permits that. The implicit subsidy essentially comes from the fact that because and I say we, but it's really all of CalPERS employers that participate in health insurance, because we allow retirees to be on the same insurance plan at the same rates as active employees. We are implicitly subsidizing those costs because it drives up the rate of the active employee pool. Normally, a retiree would have to pay more for health insurance than an active employee because they're generally older, and so the health insurance costs are higher. And so those older, putting myself in that category, us older persons are inflating the health insurance costs for younger pools, and it just happens. So that's an implicit subsidy. So there is a way of pulling out more money out of the trust if you found yourself in a point of being excessively funded or beyond 100% funded. And so we knew that those options existed. So really the language that's in here is pretty out of date and needs to be updated for more than one reason. But the reason that I'm here to talk about it today is because the funded status of the trust hasn't exactly held in the way that we thought it would a few years back. So I'm gonna go to maybe here, oh, whoops. Let's see if I can- So I'm gonna pull up this next link and try to walk you through what I think this means. I'm gonna start by saying I'm not an actuary, and if I convinced myself I was good with statistics and actuarial analysis, when I talk to these folks, I realize that that's not the case. And there's things that I don't understand particularly well. But I want to start with showing you where we were a few years ago. So this is an excerpt of several reports that I just added here for discussion purposes. So this report was prepared, like several years back. Now, everything that you look at for both pension and OPEB analysis is very dated information. So this might say for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2023, but it's based on data 2 years prior. So it's already quite out of date. And this just comes from the data lag and all the actuarials for pension and OPEB work this kind of this 2-year data lag. So in June 30, when this report was prepared, it said that the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022 showed that the district's funded percentage was 97.4, or in gross terms, I'm gonna say fully funded. That looked pretty damn good to us. We've got, we've saved up, we have 97.4% of our predicted future assets already in the, in an account that with its interest and whatnot is expected to cover 97% of those expenses going forward. And that's like a forever forward calculation. So that's when we say, okay, look, this concept that we have in the strategic financial policy doesn't seem to make sense anymore, because it was about getting us this point of fully funded. Now we're essentially here. It's time to look at withdrawing funds instead of paying as you go. And so following this point, the district began budgeting that way. We stopped budgeting for current, the pay-as-you-go portion of the current year expenses, moved all the expenses in the admin fund, and budgeted to withdraw a like amount out of the trust, assuming that this calculation will hold true. So a year later, this was updated, for June 30th, 2023, it was updated, and this figure had dipped pretty drastically to 82.5%. And bear in mind, almost nothing else had changed. We hadn't yet started taking the funds out. We had of the trust, and we saw this big dip, and it was really because we're in this COVID period when the stock market was very volatile, and the OPEB trust did very poorly from one year to the next, and that resulted in this big negative swing. And in talking to both the representatives from the actuary at the time, or previous to this, and some folks who helped us out at the CalPERS side, they said, you know what, you shouldn't look at these year-to-year fluctuations and react too significantly, because it can go up and down pretty significantly on this OPEB trust based on various assumptions. So so we didn't overreact. We said, okay, 82%, maybe it'll be better next year. And we moved forward with our plan to withdraw funds. So a year later, this report was updated. So now we're looking at information that was done, a year and a half ago. And so these reports reflect, here's the 82.5% from the prior year. And because we started withdrawing funds for several reasons, but one of which was because we started withdrawing funds, GASB requires the actuary to lower the discount rate or the assumed growth in assets. I don't really understand why, but as a result of that, the net liability increased significantly. not only because of that, from 3.5 million to 4.8 million, not only because of that reduced discount rate, also because we were facing vast increases in health insurance premiums, higher than the actuaries thought would occur. So this number jumped significantly. And the discount rate went down, and that resulted in this funded rate ratio of like 59.8%. So pretty significant. So another year, I'm sorry, okay, then this is information that I'm gonna try to explain in a way that Natalie and I were talked to the actuary, performed the calculations a few days ago. This same report includes this supplemental information. And what it does, it says, look, maybe it's helpful for you to know what this number with this funded percentage would be if the discount rate were not discounted. Because technically our investment hasn't changed, right? As a matter of fact, if you look at this, the amount of investment went down. That went down because we were withdrawing funds and and due to market conditions. But the discount rate went from 5.5 to 4.3%. And so this report says, okay, look, maybe you don't want to look at the 4.3% for your understanding purposes. So they include this additional information. And this is if the discount rate had not been reduced, what would the funding percentage have been? It would have been 71.1%. So still lower, but only about half. The decline would have been about half of what it was. So then this past spring, we got another one of these actuarial updates done because these have to be folded into our financial statements. And this report right here, the information in it will be folded into this year's audited financial statements. And the funding percentage went from 59.8% to 59.2%, further down, although just slightly. And they also, again, included this additional calculation, and you can see it went from a 71% the last year to 69%, so still declining. So,
the number for our investment, is that also from 2 years ago, or is that more current number?
2.931. It's pretty close to what's in the account right now. Or as of June 30th. Although this report predates June 30th, so that's not a June 30th.
Cause I know the markets, obviously, it's done pretty well, so I didn't know if that was since that, 2 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, so the treasury report's kind of,
3 million.
and even that's gonna be, again, kind of not current data because we've taken last year's withdrawal.
It
Included that.
it, yeah, cause
Oh.
they did an accrual to it.
Oh, okay. Anyway, the cash balance in that account is close to that figure. Even after we've taken the funds out from last fiscal year. So it's kind of holding steady at about, 2.9 million bucks. What this report is saying is, look, you really need almost $5 million, but that's the.
Would it matter if we changed our strategy from 2 to 3? Like be more aggressive? Do they take that into
Yes.
account?
Yes,
So these numbers, so they would, okay.
yes. They would eventually pick that up and it could alter the expected rate of return. It also introduces more risk. But yes, so yes, I think so here's where we left it on, because I was actually hoping that I could make a recommendation to the committee about some changes to the way we operate within these, or we make decisions based on this information. But after doing my best to understand this information better and talking to the actuary, she had recommended that we have further calls with their team about what other information they might be able to help provide us, including like recommended contributions for future years. So essentially, I think a number of things for discussion purposes today. I'm not looking for a specific recommendation or anything that's ready to go to the board for some policy changes, but I think having some understanding that the figures, the funded percentage is gonna be somewhat more volatile than maybe we would like it to be, or would be normally comfortable. So it might be not easy to know if you're quote unquote fully funded. In other words, if it went from like 97 point some percent to 82% with no other changes being made, that's very volatile in my mind. Like that's a huge drop without any other changes having been made. And that was before we started withdrawing funds. Two, we want to avoid being over fully funded. In other words, as nice as it might be to be super conservative and keep dumping more and more money into this trust, it could work against the district in the out years, because this fund probably will never be retired. Even though the district's positioned itself to have reduced liabilities once all of the employees who are hired prior to May 2014 die. I'm one of those. And so the liability will be gone once all of these older, longer term employees have both retired and expired. Then the liability goes down, because for employees hired after that, the obligation is that PEMCA minimum. It's something like, right now represents, under 10% of the cost of let's say two persons on a health insurance. So much smaller obligation going forward. There's still an obligation going forward, and you cannot fully withdraw the funds out of the trust until there is zero liability. So you're essentially locking that money away and losing the ability to use it more flexibly. So I would caution against exceeding 100%. Our goal was to be in fully funded status, but there's some reasons that maybe getting over 100% are concerning. There are some tools available using like that implicit liability or implicit subsidy to lower that figure down if you were to get into that case. So I'm more thinking that we should look at this as like a range, like, hey, we want to be in something like 80 to 100% funded status. We don't want to be over 100. We don't want to be below 80. Maybe 75 is the right figure. I don't know what that sort of floor figure should be as far as a target goes. But we don't want to lock ourselves into being 100% as a goal. Otherwise, this thing is going to be really difficult to kind of keep up. It's gonna drive us kind of crazy from year to year because of these various fluctuations. Two, there's a couple of ways to increase the funded status. One, you can make additional contributions to the trust. That's the most direct way. The actuary won't pick that up for a couple years because this is all very dated information already. So you'll be stuck with these assumptions, these figures for a little while. Two, we can opt not to take reimbursement for our retired, stop withdrawals, essentially go back to pay as you go, or a portion of pay as you go. And that has sort of the same effect, right? If you don't take money out, if you don't take $100,000 out, it has the same effect as putting $100,000 in if you were to have taken the funds out. So I was originally thinking, okay, maybe we can come up with a system that based on that percentage funded formula utilizes some combination of those tools to kind of try to keep us in that 80 to 100% thing, funded status. And from a simplicity point of view, I think that's still where I'd like to be. I don't think we know enough yet if something like that will work for us. And so we're seeking out some more information from the actuary who works for the district. And we'll do some more research on how are others dealing with this. It appears in talking to the actuary and PERS that some agencies just do this, like if there's excess funding available, they dump into the trust, and if not, they just let this go.
Regardless of
yeah.
whether you're over or under.
Well, nobody's over here. We are way up there because we're tiny and but most of these agencies were much bigger, huge obligations that are just barely tipping their toes in the water. So we're really in good, we're really actually in way better shape than most. But I couldn't tell you that we're fully funded, and I was thinking a few years ago that we had kind of solved this problem. And so there's more volatility here. This is a little more challenging than I thought it might be in terms of policy creation to come up with something that really works good long term. But I wanted to bring this to your attention and get some feedback on some concepts so that we can continue going forward with some research. Ultimately, I think this whole section of the strategic financial policy needs to be replaced And there needs to be more practical guidance in here about when the district's gonna put more money in and how, and what is your, maybe I'm overreaching, but maybe we're saying, look, cause here's, let me give you an example. We're either at, depending on how you wanna look at these figures, we're either at best information available today, 59% funded status or 69% funded status. That doesn't feel like fully funded. If we were to take this information and act on it soon, like next fiscal year, it would mean probably at least stopping withdrawals, which mean the district that the admin fund is gonna incur expenses of, I'll just throw around numbers, like $250,000 without, which would mean, because there's no reimbursement from the OPEB trust, that $250,000 is spread out to the other funds. Take fire as an example, 25% is gonna go to fire, that's $55,000. Just for this one little item. Next fiscal year, it has a significant impact on these funds. So if the committee and then ultimately the board, maybe you're comfortable being like, hey, we don't want, we don't need to be fully funded. We're gonna end up, we're happy with being 59 or 69% fully funded. And we'll make contributions when it's convenient, and as long as we stay above 50%. I'm just throwing that out there, it's just a concept, because this could have really significant implications in the very near term, depending on how we react to the information.
So what is the fear is that if we continue to sort of if it stays volatile and we are continuing to withdraw and not make contributions, at some point it could get carried away where we can't catch back up.
No, I would say at some point, what will happen is this balance right here this $2.9 million will drop slowly, predictably, because we're spending 200 round numbers, 250,000 a year. It's earning some interest, but if it doesn't earn close to 10%, we'll cover that cost. And over time, it'll go down, and then 15, 20 years from now, there'll be not enough money to cover the costs, and we'll be right back to where we were 10 years ago.
As you go.
Now, the liability at that point will be smaller. Some of us will undoubtedly have expired. We have people who've been on this plan, have been retired from the district since the 90s, and they're still in the plan.
And there's 13 individuals currently who
Well,
are
it's not
retired.
right.
Who are on the plan, who are on a plan. There are other, we have employees who are eligible for this, who maybe they retired from the district, but went and got another job that has health insurance, they're not on the district's plan. Or maybe they retired from the district and they're one of those post 2014 hires. And they opted to get health insurance some other way other than through CalPERS, because even though the district's paying $159, it's still not a low cost.
And once you waive, you can't come back.
You can, there's an open enrollment period every year.
So we have a couple of retirees that are on like their spouses.
Oh, but they can still,
So, I mean, if even we withdraw the money from this, since we have $3 million, this should at least last 20 years, right?
Yeah, I would think so. It depends on how fast, depends how long people live,
Yeah.
And
and
how fast
And
the
how-
rates keep going up.
yeah, if the rates go up faster, I mean, the rate increases for health insurance. Though, if those go up faster than the actuary predicts, that takes a big bite out of this,
I
or,
think last year she was saying they
It's-
thought they budgeted like 7% increase in health insurance and it went up 15. So she said it just changed it quickly.
And then if we went to a more aggressive strategy, is that like a 2% extra more, I think?
I don't know, we could talk to the actuary to see what the results of that would be, just so you have a sense of, you have a sense. But yes, that's a decision that the board can make at any time. We can change the investment strategy from 2 to more conservative or less conservative, and I do believe it'll change this to a degree.
how big can the sort of like the denominator of possible employees grow if we've got, so there are 13 retirees receiving medical coverage, but you're saying that that a retiree could come back and say, actually, I do want coverage. How many more could that bump it up to? Is it a significant
So I know there's a few of them. I don't know.
Not very many.
Okay.
No, there's not very many,
There's
because
like
one,
4 or 5.
you have to retire from this agency, not
Right.
just have been affiliated with this agency
Okay,
originally. And there are, again, that number, I don't know, I don't know that the district's ever had a retiree decease. And so that, but we do have some folks that are getting older,
oh,
Another-
okay.
so that number will go down.
Yeah.
Did we ever, did we know, did someone die that I don't know?
Do you have to work for Templeton for a period of time? What, 5 years or something along those lines and retire to be able to get that benefit?
So there's two sets of rules. There's the pre-2014 set of rules. And so for a brief period of time, that was the case. The district did have this, it's called the, I think it's called PERS has a kind of a system in place where it's based on number of years, in PERS, number of years of the agency. Once we went to, this is no longer available for new employees, it was fit, you retired, you had to start before 2014 in order to be eligible for that fully funded portion. Once post 2014, there is no requirement. Somebody can come here, work 6 months. They have to, in order to retire, you have to work with PERS 5 years. You have to have 5 years with PERS. So otherwise you're not a retired, not an annuitant, so to speak. So, but somebody could come here, work for the last 6 months of their career, and then stay on the district's health insurance plan, but the district's obligation at that point is the PEMCA minimum.
Before, we had a problem with the policy where you could, if you had worked here, you could be working here 1 day and retire out prior to 2014. Make it for home insurance. So it's kind of one of the reasons why it ended up changing.
So I mean, all of the districts took steps, many years ago to kind of limit the growth of this liability going forward. But up until 2014, it was significant, and we still have right now four active employees who are eligible for that sort of enhanced retirement benefit. But again, that will go down and nobody new is eligible for it. So the district took steps to reduce its liability, the growth of its liability, but nonetheless, this is what we're facing today. And yeah, so I think just sort of having to balance these various factors out, like, you know, how important is it to be fully funded? Because it's going to probably trigger in the short term either reductions in withdrawals or contributions, and both of those things have the same impact on all the various funds. You know, or if you're saying, look, hey, I'm comfortable being, as long as we're more than 50%, that's my target. And then at times when there's extra funds available, that's when we should, because we can make contributions to the OPEB trust anytime. We can write a check tomorrow and deposit it in that account, and eventually it gets picked up in this actuarial study. But you know, as we're sort of thinking about this, the soonest this would impact the district, if you made a policy change, would be next fiscal year. And the things that I'm kind of looking at, even without having all the answers, is like, hey, if you want to be 80 to, I was originally coming here thinking, I want to be like the 80 to 100%. That seems like fully funded based on the volatility and whatnot. We're not there.
And we could always do partial too, right? Partially withdraw some of instead
Sure,
of
sure.
fully
Sure.
withdraw 200. Because I think, I calculated, right? If we would withdraw $120,000 to $150,000, we would be okay. But since we were withdrawing 250, that's where I think is challenging us. So like if we could maybe fund it 100, you know, a pay as you go for only $100,000 and then pull out the rest from them, and then possibility of looking at increasing the aggressiveness of our investment, maybe that could help a little bit, but 100,000 is a lot, you know, would be a lot less pressure on us now versus.
Yeah, I think I would ideally have a policy that that kind of builds in this, so like based on the results of the most recent information, this is what the guidelines say. You could always overrule these are your
Right,
own
yeah.
guidelines. They're just, you know, you could either follow them or choose not to, but something that would help decision makers going forward predict what these costs are gonna end up being. So I guess let me here's where I think we stand. We're trying to get another call scheduled with the actuarial firm to understand what kind of additional information might be available to us in future reports or going forward. we'll also inquire about, with them about the strategy. And if the investment strategy, confirm that the investment strategy would be picked up in this report. And if we were in the more aggressive strategy, it likely would result in X, Y, or Z. And then this committee could examine those risks, and actually we have CalPERS, we can have a rep from CalPERS even join the committee meeting and talk to you about the various risks, and you can make a recommendation to change or not to change to the board, because that can be done at any time. And then, you know, it sounds like then you're, you know, I guess I'm thinking we want to be closer to fully funded than we are today. I mean,
Yes.
is that a good?
Yeah, I don't like 59 or 60.
Yeah, I don't think you should, you know, 100% is gonna fluctuate, whether
Yeah.
if you're 100 today, it may not be there tomorrow anyway, but some range of, you know, we wanna be X, Y, Z, 75% or greater, or whatever the number is. And then use that information to help make decisions about contributions. And again, let's say you landed on the challenge really is, while some funds might have excess, might have surplus funds available to make additional contributions, others, you know, maybe do not. So it's when all of these, this is a pooled, this is the liability amongst all the various funds, because they're pooled in this report.
I mean, I guess you'd be putting, I'm just trying to decide whether it's better to start funding this if we wanna go, you know, to, you know, whatever level, 75, 80%, whether it's better to fund this or do pay as you go type of thing, but yeah.
And I think it has almost the same
Yeah.
impact.
Right.
But
No.
I guess the money will grow over time, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, but if you take less out, it has the same impact as putting more money back in.
So, but can we afford doing pay as you go right now? So, but again, maybe if it's only partial amount, that could be.
Yeah, we can take a look at those things. So we'll make notes to kind of look at the investment strategy and what its possible impact might be as well. Because again, now I think we've got a better track record.
So, yeah, so like, I just looked up the strategy 3 versus strategy 2. Strategy 2 is doing almost 2% better
Okay.
over 3 years than, so.
Well, what is
That's not-
strategy 1? Is that
We're at 3.
we're at 2.
We're at
We're the
2.
sort of mid-tier.
Oh.
Maybe
One is-
1 is the,
Well, yeah, which one's the more aggressive one? Karen. And then I'm not quite certain about that liability discount rate, you know, for them to change it, just, you know.
yeah, I'm not sure I fully understand that either, because our investment's in the same place. It hasn't changed. So I think that's why.
Pulling money out or something.
Yeah, well, that's why she pointed us to this other report and say, well, this is what it would be if you hadn't, and that's where you probably, so if you're trying to compare apples to apples, like that 97 to 82.
Yeah.
To this is the number, this is the more apples to apples comparison, because that's without changing the discount
If we
rate.
do partial, would that number go up the rate? We only,
No, I think what'll happen is that the balance will stay higher right here.
but the rate would stay the same, the
Yeah.
liability.
She
discount?
just asked, the question is, are you withdrawing funds or not, and do you plan to going forward?
Yeah,
Not-
That's all that
Yep.
determines
And it's a GASB, it's not
yeah.
it's required, it's a GASB requirement, basically. In order to prepare these reports to meet GASB requirements, they have to make these various calculations, and so I don't think I don't think that's,
I think it's just a yes or no answer, and that's.
we
So
call it
you-
dollar.
yeah. So strategy 1 is over 9%, and we're getting over 7% right
So
now.
1 must,
The
So-
one must be the.
More
Okay, so
aggressive.
Another 2% higher.
So,
Oh,
okay,
in the 3-year average.
okay.
but we can talk to the actuary to see how they pick that up
Yeah.
and what happens going forward.
4% could be significant.
Yeah, and it, you know,
Over-
and now we've
Years.
got, you know, a bulk,
Yes,
substantial money in this investment, in this pool. We can absorb some highs and lows.
over a longer period,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean. The
Yeah, we're
day-to-day,
looking
the day-to-day
25,
budget
yeah.
of not getting
Yeah.
the withdrawals.
Yeah.
would Be harder.
okay.
Okay, so this will be an item that we'll follow up at your next meeting with, I suspect.
Wanna move to number 3? Regular board meeting schedule?
Yeah, this is another, actually, both items 2 and 3 are items that came out of your strategic planning, goals. One of the, items, was to consider, altering the district's regular board meeting schedule to once monthly as opposed to twice monthly. And so one of the things that we did, or Carrie did actually, was do a little survey of other special districts in this area. I think these are all in actually this county. And how often do they meet, and, et cetera. And you can see here that Templeton is just one right now of 2 special districts that meet as frequently as you need. Napomo is the other that meets twice a month. Napomo has daytime meetings, so I mean, I kinda organizations or governments that have daytime meetings, it's just a whole different ballgame,
Yeah.
so they have daytime meetings. Actually, Cambria has daytime meetings too, but they're down to once a month for now. So in the last couple of years, both Oceano and Cambria CSD have went from twice a month to once a month meetings. And then we also kind of calculated, well, how often do we cancel meetings? And over the last 3 years, we've canceled about 6 a year. So the difference really is that in my tenure here, we have only canceled meetings in advance if it was known that they were gonna fall like on a holiday. For example, one year, the first meeting in July landed on July 4th. We knew that was gonna be an obvious conflict. That meeting was canceled well ahead of time, and people could plan for that. For the most part, when meetings are canceled, they're canceled due to lack of business by the board president just a week or so before the meeting. And so, whether it's the public or the board members or staff, they wouldn't know very far in advance that meeting wasn't going to happen. So some of the other, I think when the board discussed this item, there seemed to be a receptiveness to going to one time a month. I think there's some pros and cons that you're free to discuss. One of the cons might be that you're less available to the public. Although our recent history would say it's pretty rare that we have a member of the public come to you for just some random item. Maybe only once a quarter or something do you get like a public comment that has nothing to do with an agenda item. Some of the advantages could be, more predictability about the meeting schedule. Maybe it's attractive to future board members, knowing that the obligation would be slightly less frequent. One of the other cons might be it's possible you'll have a few more special meetings that are required, because if there's an item that comes up that has to be dealt with before the next board meeting, it might require a special meeting. We don't have much of it, we don't call special meetings very often. They're typically, kind of planned, or like we did all those strategic planning meetings as special meetings, but they were kind of known and scheduled, and et cetera, known to the public as well. So, that's kind of where we stand. I think, the staff would be interested in moving to a once a month meeting, although, again, there might be some items that might require attention, would require a special meeting be called.
Yeah, I don't like the idea of having like, when you look at some of the examples here, the gap between folks who are meeting once a month and then having several special meetings. I like seeing that ours are sort of equal, in terms of, I think it's personally better to think you have a meeting and then to have it canceled than to have a special meeting pop up and then have to sort of scramble scheduling. That's just my thought. I understand that, like, we are essentially, by canceling 6 meetings a year, we are in actuality probably only meeting once a month then. Right?
Yeah, or 1.5 times a month essentially. Yeah, if you cancel 6, that means you've met 18 times in a year.
Well, the reason that this came up originally during our strategic plan was because we were talking about adding possibility in the future, having an attorney attending. And and
Over the cost of having them
yes,
attend.
yes, having them on basically on call every, every 2 or twice a month versus having them once a month, that would substantially help. And, with the cost, obviously it also is gonna be less expensive for the admin because we're only meeting once instead of twice, so that's the cost savings that we could put towards in return. And yeah, I mean, you can see all these districts are meeting once a month, and there are special meetings, and some of these districts have special meetings, but it's typically well documented, it's announced and everything, so the public could still attend them, and it's not a problem. It's just nice to know ahead of time and for board members, or even staff, that, okay, I'm not gonna have a meeting on this day, 3 months down the road, so I could go on a trip if I need to.
But then what if a special meeting comes,
Special meetings typically 24 hours, so 48 hours.
24-hour notice,
You need to.
yeah,
But I mean, typically, we don't have anything, I mean. So the
But
only
would
thing
we,
that's
though?
come up, it
Well,
was
we
the
had,
fire,
yeah,
it was just the
budget.
fire.
yeah, for the most part, our special meetings are on the same days as a regular meeting, and they're just done as a kind of a workshop for you and known in advance. I would typically, let's say there was a need to call a special meeting, because you could have that need now, I mean, like you did for the fire, we would reach out and find out your availability and ensure that we had a quorum. This might be, if the district had a need of calling, 8 or 9 special meetings in a year, or once a month, you'd have a special meeting to call, I'd say this probably didn't work.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't worth it. But if you called 1 a year because of it, or 2 a year because of it, maybe it's still the pros outweigh the cons, at least with regard to the board members' schedules. Right now, I mean, I think it would provide, more clarity about the expectation of when meetings occur and allow board members to plan, trips away. Even during those meetings, there was a period of time, like during COVID, when the Brown Act laws changed and there was no requirements to attend in person, and those relaxed Brown Act requirements they were even more relaxed than they are today, and so board members could have been free to participate from wherever. So we went like 2 years under those conditions, and then we've kind of reverted back to where now a board member can only participate remotely if they have a qualifying reason, and then there's limits on how often that can occur. So like, because they're ill, or they're taking care of somebody who's ill, or they're on district business traveling, essentially. And again, a limited number of times that can occur, so it's happened pretty infrequently. And then being on vacation is not a qualifying reason. So anyhow, if
If we need to have a special meeting, we could still probably keep it or hold it on a Tuesday, like instead of, I think you're thinking if we go to 1 meeting a month, it would be the third.
Yeah, if the committee were in favor of going to 1 meeting a month, I would recommend that we would hold those on the third Tuesdays. Because the first Tuesday of the month has a couple of potential holiday conflicts. The first meeting in January is often problematic and can fall on January 1st. And then the 4th of July or Independence Day every 6 years or so lands on that first Tuesday. The third Tuesday doesn't conflict with any district recognized holidays today. Although it could, if you start again, at some point you could recognize Juneteenth, and that would occasionally fall on that third Tuesday.
And then you could always have that meeting.
Either hold it earlier or have a special meeting instead, or whatever. And it doesn't ever conflict with Thanksgiving, although on a rare occasion it will land on Thanksgiving week, the third Tuesday, which is kind of a holiday week these days, because most kids are out of school all week. But anyway, that was just my thoughts. If there was interest in moving forward, that you would hold it on the third Tuesday instead of the first Tuesday, although you could be free to change the.
And then it will save staff time as well, all the time.
Yeah,
that goes into preparedness.
I would want to, like, if we move to once a month, keep an eye on how many new special meetings are called, because it's much
Oh, yeah.
easier to know, to like block something off on your calendar. And then to have it open up if we have a meeting canceled, than to scramble to find a date that works for everybody. Like our committee meetings are already so difficult to schedule. In the event that we have to hold a special meeting, that's much more challenging.
Yeah, well, a couple reasons why the committee meetings are challenging. One, we're only asking for daytime availability instead of nights. That is a limiting factor. And then two, like this committee is made up of two, I have to have 100% attendance, otherwise
Right,
we can't have a
yeah.
committee meeting. The board, we can have 3 or 4 people in attendance, still get board business done. So it may not be quite as difficult, especially if we open that up to evenings.
Yeah, it's gonna be evenings versus daytime, so that's.
And so would we say that like, we would try to hold a Tuesday evening in the event that a topic were to come up?
I mean, that would be, yeah, I would assume, because, yeah.
Would
people
that
do.
also?
So the board president basically calls special meetings. I think you could provide some guidance to any board president, saying we prefer these to be on Tuesdays, but I mean, for example, this issue, the reason you had a special meeting last month was because we had to respond to the fire crisis, and at the time, I couldn't have waited 2 extra days, because we would have been potentially in excess of we would have been in violation of our own policy, but not special meeting policy, money issue, but those things don't come up often. I would think that if there were items that needed to be dealt with before your next regular meeting, they wouldn't be so urgent as to not provide flexibility for scheduling that.
Okay.
It would just be like, okay, hey, we can't wait a whole month, but I can wait 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I mean, right now, we're more or less getting along fine on a twice a month schedule, and often don't have enough, don't have a whole lot on certain agendas. And I also try, I think if you went to a scheduled once a month, I would hope that would mean that more board members would plan any trips on their, would be more committed to the relatively few meetings that they had left. Because again, when I hear a board member's not gonna be here, then I'm looking around and say, okay, I'm gonna try not to put anything important on that meeting, or maybe it's a good candidate right away to cancel. So like this year, we've already had several meetings where we've had, one board member not in it, had four of you here for various reasons.
Do you anticipate moving to a once a month would lengthen the duration of each meeting?
That's what I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I think a little bit. I mean, I think that I think the meetings will probably be a little bit longer, which in general is not a problem, as we have don't have long meetings now. Although it might be wise to say, hey, look, if everyone's able to start at 6:30 or something, we do, because that will reduce the amount of times that you're hitting 10 o'clock or
Right,
whenever we're just kind of here too late, which isn't very often, but might occur more often in the future.
Yeah, that's what actually I wanted to talk about, because it will increase it, and I was just thinking even moving it to 6:30, because I was looking at other districts. For example, Napomo starts at 9 AM, San Miguel is 6 PM. California Valley is at 10 AM, Los Osos is at 6 PM, Oceano is at 6 PM, Cambria is at 10 AM, Avila is at 1 PM, Heritage Ranch is at 4 PM.
Yeah, but a lot of those are during working hours.
Yeah, so, no, I'm not saying
Yeah,
those,
yeah,
but I'm
yeah.
just saying, I mean, so for us to go to 6:30, I think it.
That would be the
we're still-
earliest.
Yeah, that would be, yeah.
I would
it's
not-
still-
yeah.
Yeah, it would, I think it would still work well, we still would, and to me, it's easier, I mean, the only district that's at 7 o'clock is at Ground Squirrel Hollow.
And they
At
have short
7,
meetings.
7 PM. So I think we still will have people will still be available in public if they wanna attend. I don't think that should be an issue. And then, I personally, like when I go to all these meetings, it's easier when they're not at 7 o'clock, it gets pretty late, and
Yeah.
if you wanna stay for the whole meeting, so getting there, especially winter time and things like that, so I think starting it a little bit earlier, it would be beneficial. So we could get the business people done in a timely manner, and so that I would like to, if we bring this to the board, I would also like to discuss that, add that to it.
So the meeting start time was discussed by the board earlier, but it was not in conjunction with going to once a month, and so maybe it was more just a matter of convenience, and now maybe there's a little more, there's some more validity to the request in terms of ensuring that you're out of here at a reasonable time, and I think that makes sense. This district doesn't have a real problem with really late meetings, but I've worked where that can happen, and it's really difficult when you're getting home at midnight to turn around and get back to work at 7 the next day,
And also,
and what kind of decisions are made after you've been in a meeting for that amount of time?
After working a whole day or?
Yeah.
like even for attorney, things, for if we do want to bring an attorney for the meetings, it's probably easier or better to start a little bit earlier.
Yeah, at the time, several months ago when this came up, there was no staff opposition to starting earlier. And I think, just my recollection from that conversation was that at least board member Mortensen had some conflicts earlier in the day, but it seemed like 6:30 would work. And at that point, the board just sort of said, well, that's not enough of a change to warrant anything. But maybe coupled with this, if this concept of going to once a month makes sense, maybe it can be done all the time.
Yeah, I think moving to 6, if we wanna move to once a month, then I would be in favor of also moving the start time of the meeting. So that if we do have a longer meeting. it doesn't come too much later. That being said, I don't think any earlier than 6:30 would work in terms of, being accessible to the public, other board members, future board members.
You'd be surprised though how many people attend like meetings at the Cambria, and it's like the room is full. It's like, oh.
I think they have a primarily retiree.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow, it's amazing.
Got nothing else to do.
Even Oceana was pretty packed, so, but yeah, I'm open to discussing that.
So, okay, let me ask you, so is then, there's kind of a couple of ways we can go forward. This can either go to the board, Hey there,
So sorry.
no problem.
Someone left a wallet in the park.
Oh, okay,
Oh,
I'll take-
and
thank you
this
so much for turning it
grandstand-
in.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, we
Sorry.
can hold those at our office.
Okay, excellent. And they said that once they have the PA up and running, they'll make an announcement in the park for him to come in
Super,
here.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jessica, do you mind just taking it to Maya? Cause that's where they go when people lose stuff at the park, which is like every other day.
I was
Like,
a
wait,
whole
is
basket of
mine?
goodies up there.
So we have a couple of options about bringing this forward. This could come forward with a recommendation and an action item for the board, like we can prepare a resolution, because the board meetings, regular meeting schedule is set by resolution. We could prepare a resolution as if the board would approve a once a month, 6:30 start time, or it could go to the board as a discussion and then come back as a future action item. What do you,
I
what's
would
the committee's recommendation?
put it as an action item, and then if the board can't reach a consensus, then fine.
I know we had discussed it,
Yeah.
the strategic plan too, so, I think we are all familiar with the item. We're gonna discuss it, so.
And then how soon would you, if this goes as an action item?
In terms of implementation. when we-
Yeah, I mean, it's done by resolution, so the resolution can take effect immediately, or you include them, this would take effect like as soon as like this, this fall, like maybe in October or something, or I already have a stuff planned for the first meeting in September, so that's your coordinating.
September 2nd,
Yeah.
won't work, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, but, I mean.
Maybe we
it-
should do something.
it- Well, I could do this like on the second meeting in September calendar, like I think it's the 16th. For the resolution to consider, and it could take effect immediately, which means you wouldn't have a meeting in the first meeting in October. And I'd have to look at our calendar to see
Yeah,
if we're tracking anything, but internally it would be helpful to kind of know what the expectation is so we can begin assigning those nights.
What do you think?
So maybe as soon as,
Potential starting in October?
Yeah.
Do you have any,
So yeah, just take a look at the schedule, see if you have anything for October first.
yeah, we'll do that.
yeah.
So we'll still have the meeting on the 16th, September 16th.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, so.
Yeah, I've got items that are already kind of
Yeah.
slated for that meeting, and that would be the meeting that you'd be keeping, right? If you went
Right,
once a
yeah.
month, it'd be
The
the
second
third
meeting.
Tuesdays.
Okay,
So to avoid confusion, yeah, I suppose.
Okay, so the committee's recommendation the action item for.
Yeah, I'll prepare a short staff report and a resolution. The recommendation from the committee would be to move regular meetings to just the third Tuesday of the month, once a month, third Tuesday at 6:30 PM. And I can include in the staff report some rationale, and obviously you could, like, you could say, hey, we also want to have this committee review in a year, review that, and then you could decide whether that made sense or
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
Review by the committee in a year, not that it expires, but that
Right.
it's just like,
Progress.
yeah. Is that kind of,
Status, yeah.
because you could change back if necessary.
Yeah, for some reason, we found that we were having an inordinate amount of special meetings as a result of moving. Number 4, compensation review for philosophy.
Okay, let me,
Trying to go till 6 o'clock, so we could just head to
I know.
the concerts in the park.
okay, so this, just by way of some background, in 20, maybe 17 and 18, the district had budgeted for a compensation study update. But it was delayed a couple of times for various reasons, cost, and then also just financial concerns. And so it moved forward in 2019, and the district did perform a comprehensive compensation study. The district board received that study in August, and in the ensuing months considered some implementation actions. And in December of 2020, so this is now almost 5 years ago, took the initial kind of actions for implementing it. And part of it was to adopt a compensation philosophy. And it reads, and this is what was presented back then and what it was adopted. Templeton Community Service District is committed to providing competitive compensation to its employees for the purposes of attracting, retaining highly qualified and skilled staff. It is the goal of the district to ensure that all positions within the district be within 5% of the median total compensation as determined by the 2020 comprehensive compensation study within 3 to 5 years, once the tier and cost of both retirement and health insurance are taken into consideration. The first phase of equity adjustments will begin on January 1st, 2021. Future adjustments shall be considered during the development of the annual budget, beginning with the fiscal year 21-22, and potentially at other intervals as well. Future phases of adjustments will consider the change in consumer price index from January 1st, 2021, as well as the district's ability to absorb cost increases within its financial resources at that time. So this adopted philosophy was never intended to be like a permanent thing, as it has some very specific references to that study that was done. Now, it was adopted by the board, and in fact, on January 1st, 2021, there were some, the first phase of adjustments took place, and then there were what I'll deem equity adjustments or adjustments other than cost of living that were approved on three, maybe 4 occasions in total, until about 2 years ago, in which case, based on the 2020 study, our calculations show that everybody was within 5%. So it's likely that a new compensation philosophy, even if it's just eliminating some of those very specific references, will be necessary, because over time this will become kind of irrelevant. One of the things that I wanted to point out, you have funded or have budgeted for an update to the 2020 compensation total comp study. So you'll have better data to look at when that is complete. You could consider changing this philosophy now, or you could wait a little while if you wished to. I wanted to provide some background to you. One of the things that I wanted to point out from the perspective of particularly recruitment for employees and retention is that some of the tools the district had historically used for retaining employees just don't exist right now. There's been significant changes in philosophy or in the benefits the district provides. One of which we just spent a bunch of time talking about, and that's that OPEB issue. The district up until 2014 essentially promised employees if they retired from the district, they would get fully paid health insurance. While that was viewed as being unsustainable as far as a liability and expense goes, it was effective in retaining folks, because if they were near the end of their career, they were less likely to leave the district because they had this really significant benefit if they had quote unquote retired from Templeton CSD, less likely to take a job elsewhere. So that's one item. The district also, when we looked at the 2020 data, most of the positions were below 5% of, further off than 5% from median. So they required adjustments upward. There were a couple of exceptions, but in general, the positions in the study required adjustments to get to that 5% goal. Which means that because of the tools that we have available, in terms of our salary matrix, if a position moves from one range to the next, so for example, range 68 to range 69, there's an approximately 2.5% delta between those two ranges. And so as a result of various equity adjustments to try to get every position within 5%, my expectation is that what we'll find is that most of the positions now are between 2.5% and 5% below median. Because they achieved being within 5%, but didn't get further than 2.5% because of the tools that we have available. And the goal was to get within 5%. At the time, that was considered to be, market. So my expectation is that we'll find that many positions are going to be just a little bit below market, maybe within 5%, but below market median. And so that's something else to kind of keep in mind. Again, I don't have any specific revised language for the committee to consider at this time, but I wanted to provide some background. We have, while we're still largely successful in retaining employees, even without the retiree medical care, but many of our employees do leave. Some are leaving because they have desires to move out of the area. We have had employees retire even without that enhanced medical benefit. They stay here until retirement. The bigger challenge is really on the recruitment side, where when we're looking for positions that have specific requirements, for example, I use water, wastewater requirements as an example. We get often some pretty thin pools. For example, we just conducted a recruitment and got 0 qualified applicants and had to extend that recruitment. So some of those positions are going to be hard to fill almost no matter what. We had a real difficulty filling our district engineer position as an example. Other positions within the district, we might get a much more robust pool, a larger pool, if they don't have a lot of specific requirements. Positions that I'm not sure they're fair to call entry level, but more that the experience can be picked up in a variety of ways as opposed to a more specialized way. In those cases, we're getting stronger applicant pools, but that's more rare. For the most part, we're struggling to get deep applicant pools, which means we're either prolonging the appointment or we're having pretty limited options to kind of pick from. So our recruitment is still a weakness of the district. As an employer, we're not getting deep pools with obvious candidates at every opportunity or every time that we do it. So is that related to the 5% below median? I don't know. Or just the circumstances that we face. We're in a very high cost area with wages that don't match the cost of living, sort of in general, in challenging in terms of housing costs and whatnot, things that are kind of well out of our control, but nonetheless affect the employment pools. So that's sort of a little bit of background on that. I don't know if I'd be happy to take a stab at kind of revising this somewhat to remove some of these references that are just not gonna be very applicable for much longer. Or you could suggest that, look, we should wait and see what the next compensation update looks like, and maybe at that time, revise the study to reflect that. It's kind of hard because we don't have that data to share with you yet.
We have the compensation study budgeted, but we haven't yet
Done.
moved forward or.
Yeah, it's actually our next agenda item.
Right. I would say maybe just hold off and wait until the compensation study to revise the policy, but.
I mean, one thing, I do like, I mean, if you're looking at this, one thing is though, where did it go? It says something, future phases of adjustments will consider the change in consumer price index from January 1st, 2021. So that would indicate like it could be accumulative then?
I mean, that's what we have presented to the board in the
Yes.
past, is this, what is the results, and
Probably that would be worth discussing as well.
whether or not you wanna kind of keep that date, or how do you wanna look back at all, or only look at the current data?
Yeah.
Yeah, is it,
Because that could get, especially since we're doing the compensation study, seems like every 5 years. Then we, I don't know if we wanna do cumulative, but that would be one area that I think would be discussion item too. But yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, we could do the compensation study and see what happens from there, because who knows, maybe the board wants to change the 5%.
Right.
To, depending on how far we are, maybe.
I mean, having an outdated philosophy is just, it's not,
yeah,
it's
it
just not
wasn't,
ideal.
yeah,
but-
no, yeah, I don't think you're, we've kind of, again, the key points in here the district has achieved. You made adjustments to the positions that were more than 5% out of whack over a period of years, and got them to within the 5%. And then you have considered cost of living adjustments in relation to the consumer price index, looking back, each year. Every year that was the COLA was awarded may not have matched that exactly, but it was considered, and there's language in this philosophy that says, as well as consider the district's ability to absorb cost increases within its financial resources at the time. And so I can say that absolutely that you've adhered to this philosophy, and you've achieved what it set out to do. I don't know necessarily that it means that every position that we test for, or examine, that will land in the exact same place, because there have been other changes in the marketplace, and whatever. This was really just looking at a point in time, really in 2020, and then COLA since then. So we'll revisit this after as a part of the adoption of the study, or when the study's data is available. Does that sound like
Yeah.
that's appropriate?
Justin, I just noticed your new title. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
District General Manager. That's one there.
Yeah, thank
One
you.
is on the way, so.
Learning a lot.
Yeah.
Happy to be here.
Justin didn't have any particular assignments for today's meeting, but
That's good to hear.
You're probably gonna be one of the new positions, right?
Yeah.
In the compensation study.
Uh-huh. Okay,
so heading on to the next item is this compensation study update. I did want to, the board did approve funds in the 2025-26 budget to update the 2020 compensation study. And I've had now correspondence with we happen to use RGS. RGS is a consulting, it's an agency really that is primarily made up of retired local government employees who work mostly remotely and kind of part-time, and they kind of come and go. And they're cost competitive. Back in 2019, we struggled to get bids to do this work. Ultimately selected RGS because they were willing. A lot of consultants don't want to work with us. Our budget's really tiny, and we're in the middle we're not in the middle of nowhere, I love where we are. We are not in the urban parts of California where it's cheap to provide services here, and so cost for consulting work can be really pricey in this area compared to like if we were in Sacramento or Bay Area or something. So, because they're not here, so travel costs can be really, can be a real, burden. So I have, originally reached out to the HR point of contact at, RGS back in June, after the budget was approved, and really got no response, and so, a month later, realized that person is no longer with RGS, found a new contact, reached out to her, name is Betsy, and have been in correspondence with her now for a few weeks. And I think she has enough so here's what they've committed to is, they've asked several questions about what we wanted to have updated. And I said, that we were not interested in re-examining the comparators. In other words, there was a decision made about what the comparing agencies were back in 2019. And that's a pretty time consuming process, and for consistency, there might be value just keeping those. But that we wanted to update all the other data, and that there had been a couple of positions that had changed, new classifications that exist here. And then some minor changes to some classification requirements. And after I provided that information, she asked one other question, but is committed to providing a proposal. So that's kind of where we stand. If that proposal comes in, well within budget and it's reasonable in terms of the time commitment or the when they expect to have it done, we can move forward with RGS without having to go, examine other HR consulting.
You don't have to do an RFP then, or,
No, our rules don't require for a value for a cost this low.
okay, was it
Yeah,
under 25? Is that what it was?
Yeah, we budgeted 20.
Oh, okay.
I'm hoping this is somewhere in there, but
Last time, okay.
so anyway, that's where we stand. So I was hoping when we put this agenda together, I was thinking maybe we'll have that proposal and we'd be sort of underway, but we don't yet. But they appear to be working on it because they again have asked questions on 3 or 4 occasions over the past couple weeks. So anyhow, our goal was to have that completed by the end of the year. That data available, and I share that with RGS anyway. If they come back and say they can't do it, then we'll have to get other proposals, and that'll be more time consuming. And based on my recollection from 2019 was we had only one other company that was interested in doing it. The costs were like double, like 50 grand. Yeah, I mean, again, it's expensive to do work for us. It's a lot of this.
Is it possible to do it internal? Are you assistant general manager? Could do it?
Yeah, I mean, you can, but it's nice to have some independent.
Yeah, of course,
some,
but I mean,
some
yeah,
objective review of like the requirements and comparisons.
yeah, but if, we wanna pay that kind of money.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope that's not gonna be the case, but.
Yeah.
All I know is back then, we had a real struggle getting interested parties, and RGS was the only real viable option.
Where are they located?
I think they're out of Monterey or something, but their people don't really work there.
Yeah.
These are all kind of remote, working from wherever they retired. And the last time,
What was his name?
Ed Rea, I think he was doing work from out of Southern California. Ed Rea, but actually I RGS helped us out with some other human resource work even a couple years later, and they had a gal that was, she was working in Texas.
Carmel Valley.
We did the
Carmel
recruiting
Valley.
for
Yeah.
my position, I interviewed with them and did tests through them.
Yeah.
That must be good.
Yeah.
They got you.
Well, you guys.
Okay, district office hours.
All right, this is another kind of somewhat related topic. You may recall that during our strategic planning workshops, we had kind of discussed that we should at the same time we're looking at hard dollar or cost, benefits and wage issues, we should look at, policies and workplace practices that may or may not be helping or hurting our recruitment and retention efforts. So I just wanted to have kind of a conversation with the committee about just how those differ based on where people might be assigned and where they work, and some of the challenges we have, at least at the district office. So, the fire department is a 24-hour, 24/7 operation. There are no real hours. The door to the fire department is generally locked. There's a doorbell. And occasionally when people, I think they're able to get help if there's people here. Oftentimes, more often than I would think is necessary, people walk over to our office looking for the fire department, someone at the fire station, which means
They're
that
usually on call.
they're off there, they're either on a call or a training or whatever. Yeah, they cannot always be here. We don't have an administrative staff person, so we don't really have fixed hours at the fire department.
What are people walking in for the fire department?
Or,
They have questions
yeah,
or.
plans they wanna submit, they like to talk.
They like to bring their kids for a little.
Yeah.
tour, so
Yeah.
just-
Oftentimes, the doors are, like you'll see, the bay doors are open and people are kind of wander in, they find someone and they get like a impromptu tour or something. Or they'll pull the engine out or that kind of thing. But there's very little bit, when something has to be, when business has to be like a formal plan submittal or a permit or something, they all say to come here anyway,
Right.
because we have a dedicated staff. So that's the fire department. They all work, as you know, with the exception of the fire chief, 24-hour shifts. It's a kind of that's kind of the model that's used. Out with their utilities and our parks and recreation, our parks, I'll say our field crew, not necessarily office parks rec staff, but the field crew. They work out at the Meadowbrook wastewater treatment plant. There is no general public access to that facility, although it's gated, but the gates typically open during business hours. We discourage public from going out there for a number of reasons. It's a very kind of hidden away facility. There's not necessarily public facilities at that location. But there are vendors that go out there and
Neighbor.
deliver, deliveries that are accepted at that site. The working hours for the utility crew in general is 7 to 3:30 with a 30-minute lunch. The utility and maintenance folks that hold the title of a senior operator or a senior utility operator or a senior maintenance worker have the option of working a 980 schedule, in which case they would be off every other Friday, but work longer days on the non-Fridays. I'm sorry. For the senior parks maintenance person, their off days is not on a Friday, it's a Monday. That's because
No,
we
it's
have,
Friday. It got changed.
I thought we weren't doing that because we have these heavy park obligations on Fridays, but okay, separate, anyhow. Learn something. There is likely interest amongst the utility and park staff to have more flexibility on their work schedule. We don't have customers that we serve out there. We're serving customers in the community. So it's more of an internal issue of balancing out the work schedule, but my guess is there'd be people interested in working different schedules if it were offered to them from the utility crew. At Parks and Recreation, we have 2 full-time staff members there and 1 part-time staff member. That building is open to the public generally from 9 to 6, Tuesday through Friday. And that is also their hours generally, although there are some exceptions. And that building, because of the small staff size, does need to close occasionally because we don't have enough people to staff it. So when it closes, we put a sign on the door and customers come or whatever, come back, call later, whatever. Those staff members also typically work Saturdays because that's when we have most of our, we hold, soccer, basketball, softball, etc. Although the hours are not always the same and oftentimes they're kind of longer days depending on the work schedule. And although we have customer traffic that goes directly into that building, we don't have a requirement as an internal policy to ensure that there's always 2 staff members there. we take payments, but we're not shutting anybody's utilities off or doing collecting activities there, and most of the interactions are pretty positive. The rec department, there's also often others in the building. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, for most of the year, there's a preschool that runs in there with a couple of, preschool educators and preschool age kids, and in the afternoons, there's often, youth in there after school, et cetera. And from time to time, there have been other programs held in that building, such as tutoring and other programs, and the building gets a little bit of after hours use as well. The district office here, pre-COVID, was open 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, virtually without exception. And we would have to schedule the staff to stagger lunch times, and when people were gone, it became kind of challenging to ensure we were able to be open. And part of that is an internal policy, because we take payments and because we deal with occasionally angry customers or people who are upset with the district or upset with who knows what. We have 2 persons present anytime we're open to the public. Once COVID hit, for a few months, we were actually closed to the public. I don't remember for how long exactly, but for a period of time. Everybody was closed, if you remember. We had those glass panels up, et cetera. When we restored service after that, we made the decision to have a hard closure from noon to 1. So we're open 8 to noon and 1 to 5 Monday through Friday. And that hasn't really resulted in any complaints, although every once in a while I'll see somebody trying to come in to do something between noon and 1. And actually every once in a while someone will try to come in before 8 or after 5 or whatever too.
That's worked really well.
You mean that having a hard closure? It's been easier from a staffing point of view because you don't have to schedule, not have to arrange the various person's schedules or have to have lunch at a certain time or a different time in order to ensure that we had coverage. So our big challenge in the district office is really coverage, not necessarily work. But it's ensuring that we have, yes. So we have challenges when we have people gone, sick, whatever, to ensure we have 2 people. Although it's not a big challenge, but that's when we run into some hiccups. There's always having 2.
How many folks work out of the district office?
If we're fully staffed, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 if we count Lori, and a half if we count Tasha. But Lori's office is way back there, pretty impractical to try to. I mean, she could be of assistance, but not necessarily help somebody at the counter. So that's kind of where we stand. We've had some requests over the years to allow different schedules, like that would allow people to leave work earlier or have other times of days of the week off. So in other words, maybe something like where they didn't work until 5, or they had 410 or 980. And our challenge has been, well, it's going to just lead to more challenges with regards to being able to have the appropriate staffing to serve the public. So I would be much more, I would think we could accommodate more variety in work schedules if we had a less rigid open to the public schedule. And so if you or the board were willing to have, hey, we're not open on Fridays except by appointment, we can still answer the phone call. It's really it's the in-person stuff that's concerning. It's not the phone calls or the work. It's the being open to the public at the counter that presents the safety concerns. If we weren't open on Fridays, or if we weren't open, or we're only open on every other Friday, or we're only open to Fridays at 4, or if we weren't open till 5 o'clock every day, all of those things would provide. And I don't have a specific recommendation, but all of those things would provide more opportunities for us to allow alternate work schedules. And if we think the alternate work schedules would be beneficial in recruiting employees and retaining employees, then that's where the payback might occur. one thing that was really interesting, that's in my, this is just my unscientific observation, is pre-COVID, we were a very different, we served a very different role than we do now. There was a lot more people who did in-person, communication, in-person bill pay. For example, we had a lot of, and I don't wanna call the older community, but a lot of folks just every month came in and had to talk to everybody and would be there for 20 minutes just to make a payment. Well, once COVID hit and all that sort of went away and never came back. Was that?
It never came back.
They never came back. They just, you know, this was, they spent like a whole day paying their bills, right? They went here, they went to PG&E, they went to, I don't know, gas company. I don't even know where you can go. And so that has changed pretty radically. Most people, you know, we don't get a ton of in-person traffic. Maybe more at the very end, you know, right before shut off time or when the bills are due, that kind of thing.
And bank drafts has changed a lot. I mean, we're at like 900 bank drafts a month now. That's a third of our bills.
Oops. So if you thought the board was receptive to altering the customer service hours, I'll say, or the in-person ones, because I think
Yeah.
you could totally, it's totally different when it's by appointment. Because then you know, if somewhere we're making an appointment, one, we might know the person and have less risk. Or two, we can ensure there were multiple people here, yeah, we also have that window that we put up outside, kind of as a COVID thing, just like if it's ever happened again, how could we serve the customers without them coming into the office? We'll really never put that to use, it's functional. So we have some tools available, and we have the technology in place to be able to answer phone calls remotely. Again, that's something that we used during COVID, but not really much since. So we have those kind of tools available to us, but this is still a very small town and there's still, you know, expectations of personal service and accessibility, so.
So if you close Fridays, so people would be working 4/10s. So.
No, I think it would give us an option of working whenever. I mean, they could work 5/8, you know, 4/10s, 5/8s, 9/80s, they'd still be here.
They still be here.
It's not a matter of the work, it's a matter of serving the customers. It's a safety issue. It's an internal, it's a safe, you know, we do have, not often, but intimidating people, I don't wanna say necessarily threatening, I think there's, you know, yell, and people are thinking, they get angry, you know? You're shutting off their water, we're regulating them.
Yeah.
In some cases, we're regulating their business, we're threatening to turn off their utility because of non-payment. We do have negative interactions. Not a ton, but they do occur.
I think that moving at least to 1 day appointment only should be okay in terms of offering some flexibility in terms of.
So how they would
Staffing.
call to make an appointment. like,
Well,
Friday.
we would just be posted outside office hours, this and this, Fridays by appointment, and then it would depend on what they needed to have done. For example, if, you know, if it's an engineering item, plan submittal, it'd be up to Lori to schedule that appointment, or they just couldn't come and do it over the counter.
I probably wouldn't, I think Friday would be the worst day to do that though, by appointment only.
Why?
Because I think a lot of people, Fridays, I feel like a lot of people that I know have the most flexibility. And so you're like already, like a lot of people already have Friday off. And so the ability to come in on a Friday might be nice.
Mhm.
Versus, you know, does that make sense? If everybody, so I would, yeah, I would pick a different
So
day.
we could actually do some surveying if you'd like. Friday, I think, is the day that's most commonly not open for government, for agencies like us, but I totally understand your point. It's
It's
so
also like
some.
most common for
People have the day off, yeah, so like us. So, you know, we can do some surveying and see what other agencies have for hours, but I know it's not uncommon for someone only be able until 4 or closed on Fridays or closed every other Friday.
Yeah.
All those options exist. All those options are now pretty widely used. And I would say 20 years ago, or 30 years ago, they weren't ever used, or, you know, the expectations have changed over time. You know, COVID partly, but also just way people communicate. you know, we can do so much more via email or phone than, you know, than needing to meet in person. But we could survey,
Friday, they still have, you know, could still do by itself. Say if it's something more like engineer, plan checks and things like that, they could still make an appointment.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking is, as he mentions, most of the time, the government agencies are closed. You kind of expect them to be closed on Fridays. So I don't know how it would look if we
Picked a different
close,
day.
yeah, like a Monday or a Tuesday.
Fridays are very slow here,
Are they?
so most of the in-person traffic is comes, so we close on like Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, those are when more people are coming in, so Friday would
Less
probably make
impactful.
more, yeah, it would probably make more sense for people to come in by appointment, because we're not having as much traffic on Fridays anyways, whereas we are at the
Yeah.
end of the day.
Okay.
Maybe the walk-up window is open on Friday.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea too. Aside from like the actual space, are there any other employees working elsewhere? Like if we had the space who could work at the district office to help with the 2-person minimum?
so it's not so much about where they work, but what they're capable of doing. I suppose like our office folks, like, you know, it would have the same problem like at Parks and Rec. Cause if we had, they're often just down to one person anyway, or, you know, so if that person left to come here, we'd be closed there altogether. So, we don't have a lot of, and then again, they get have persons who have so it's not especially difficult to do the thing like help customers. I would hate to have somebody come here just to help, just to process payments when there wasn't much other work they could do here. Because there's not enough payment activity to justify somebody 100% devoted to just processing in-person payments. I mean, I don't know, on a given day that maybe some days there's 5, some days there's 10,
There's like,
2 or 3 in person. It's
We
not a
do
lot.
have it under don't we have it under strategic plan where we would?
This is it.
look at,
Yeah.
you know, in terms of the design of the office?
Yeah, you know,
That
that's,
would be,
yeah.
because I think some point would be nice to have most people under one roof. Especially for Parks and Rec, you know, they're isolated
Yeah,
by
over there.
themselves over there.
Well, yeah, I mean, cause you were mentioning, you know, Lori's office is back here, and so like technically it could be counted as the one of the 2.
And she would, like, let's just say, cause we have this sort of thing about 2 people, let's say I was the second person and I had to leave the office. I would say, Lori, are you gonna be here? Can you keep your door open? And then tell the person, yell for Lori if there's an issue, cause she's right here.
yeah, I mean, there's times where there's only one person in here in the office because 2 or 3 of us are in here during a meeting.
Oh, right.
Yeah, some of it's just meeting times,
Yeah.
meetings, we're small, so like if you have just, when we have a staff
Three of
meeting,
The office staff,
us 3 are here in a staff meeting.
we're down
And
one
we're down,
person.
you're down, we're short a person, if someone's sick, this is it, it'll be just one person.
So,
It happens
so
quick.
in the event that like something is happening in there right now,
Well, I'd have these doors open.
Yeah. We know there's 2 people in there right now, so.
But yeah, it's, that getting down to 2 people happens frequently. We're down to 2 people. Just,
Yeah, cause right
a
now
lot.
we're down at our customer service rep, cause we're hiring that position.
Yeah, I'm willing to look at.
do you want more data to help justify the, I mean, you don't have to make a decision, this can go to the board too, but do you want us to do some surveying to see what other folks have some hours or?
well, I would like to know, like, in terms of what is the preferred option from staff, you know, what is the more attractive, like flex perk, you know what I mean? Is it
Well, I think that would be
Closing on a-
determined.
is it alternative schedules?
Well, see, I
Well,
think
that would be
closing
determined.
closing on, or not being open to the public
Then
would
give
provide
us-
the options that we
Exactly.
could offer.
Then we-
So if you're not open on Friday, I would not require us to not work on Fridays. It would just be like, okay, now you have a choice of these schedules.
Got it, okay.
Yeah,
And if you prefer an 8 to 5 Monday to Friday schedule, you absolutely can still have that. And most of our work is internal, it's like we support these other departments. People would still come in to get keys, et cetera. But this is the most constrained because of the fixed office hours. I think we can look at our other areas and say, does it make sense to consider other hours for, again, maybe other utility operators or maintenance workers? Those would be, the challenges would mostly be felt internally and not necessarily to customers, at least
Yeah.
customers walking in.
The other thing too is like if you have staff coverage and maybe they're working 9 to 80s, so they're coming in earlier and leaving later, you can be open.
That's what I was
maybe
wondering.
in office from 7:30 to 5:30 to
Okay.
get those people, because we have people that,
Yeah.
you know, they're trying to get to work to make a payment, you know, at the counter.
So, yeah.
So-
Or maybe even just through the walk-up window at those times.
Or
or
use the
something like
walk-up
that.
window.
So yeah, so that's what I was wondering, so if someone's working 4 10s, let's say, then I guess you could,
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
you could be open.
Yeah.
7 to whatever.
Yeah, and it's tough though. We haven't talked about this internally. I would not want to publish those hours based on one person's availability. They're sick, all of a sudden, no one's here till 6.
Yeah,
That's true.
yeah.
I want to be very predictable.
I see.
Our
So,
hours, we're gonna meet with,
so I
very
guess,
few
so
exceptions.
I guess you'll see how many people are doing 980s versus 410s versus 5/8, and then, based on that, maybe you could publish.
sure. But I think to start with, I'd want to start with, what are the hours that, or would you be willing to, do you think the district is, you know, this isn't a definitive thing here, but would be willing to not be open on Fridays? Because that opens up a number of options. Or would you be willing to say, hey, we're willing to close at 4:30? Because we had a request, hey, I'll keep I want to have a 30-minute lunch and go home early. I said, well, that puts us in a challenge of covering this. That's when we have the biggest challenges at the end of the day. So,
Even half a day Friday would be helpful, I think, if we close down. So, yeah, I'm okay with taking
Yeah.
a look at that.
do you want, before this were to be set sort of formally, do you think there's more data that we should provide, or you're okay with being somewhat more flexible and just say, we can have a recommendation from staff?
I mean,
that-
it'd just be nice to know what other maybe districts are doing. You know, if it's possible, it's not too much trouble.
Yeah, I think it could be something we could kind of figure out. And not just, I think it's probably more important to look at, you know,
Well,
what are, like, you know, what our neighbors are doing, what does a Tasker Mutual Water do? Because
Yeah.
that's the same kind of customers we have, right? They
Yeah.
come to pay a water bill, they come to deal with some issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, some of these other districts that you know, they're so different from what we.
Right.
Our issues, again, the stuff that's, generally the development related things are gonna, we do get walk-in customers who want a wheel serve or whatever, but those are the, you know, it's the payments and things like the utility payments that are stuff that we don't know what's gonna happen.
Yeah,
And creates the most,
yeah, and then like you have Cambria, which has like double the staff, so, you know, they have other resources to maybe be open more often.
yeah, I think they're actually open less.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
This is like, yeah. A very different community though, too.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah.
it's just almost a retiree thing, so.
Alright.
So we can pull together some data and then we can talk internally and.
See what works for you
And it
guys.
sounds like then, when it comes to the utilities and whatnot, it's more of an internal issue for us to.
So this is what it says it says Cambria is open Monday through Thursday, 10 to 4.
Oh, wow.
And every other Friday from 10 a.m. to 4.
Yeah, see, they're,
And then closed for lunch from 12 to 1.
they're sort of like half the hours that we're
Oh,
open.
wow.
It's
10 to 4, wow.
10 to 4 closed for lunch. So that's 3 hours less a day. And every other Friday, it's half. Half the customer.
Much, but they're different.
Yeah,
Yeah, I remember seeing the office, yeah, I was surprised, a lot of them closed quite a bit.
10 to 4 plus lunch hour, it's great. Okay, so, we wanna talk about the design plan, Templeton design plan?
Sure, this is another item, I just started grabbing items off your strategic planning that I thought maybe could come to this committee. So there's been some discussion about should we, or how do we ask the county to update the design plan? And there's really two documents that might be referenced, that are specific to Templeton. They're referenced in the county's, planning documents, so to speak. The design plan and community plan, and they both date back to the early nineties.
Yeah.
1990 and 1994. So I guess I'm not even bother pulling them up, but anyway, they contain they contain elements not necessarily related to this committee's work. But the issue really before us is the process upon which we request the county to update the plans. So, I think nobody could argue these things are, 30 and 35 years out of date. A lot has changed in Templeton in that amount of time. Now Napomo is going through, I say Napomo, the county is updating the Napomo Community Design Plan right now.
Oh.
And so we've done some research about how did that get this similar issue.
Yeah.
Their design plan dated back decades. And so we try to figure out how did Napomo, how was that initiated? And there were some articles you may have read about this, and apparently, Supervisor Jimmy Paulding is Napomo's in his district. So we contacted his office, Carrie said was these correspondence. And apparently this was sort of essentially was initiated by Supervisor Paulding, not necessarily someone in the Napomo community or not necessarily Napomo Community Services District. And keep in mind, they have very different services than we do. They don't do parks and recreation or fire or other kind of more community or tax funding kind of things. They're more of a utility provider only. His office, Jimmy Paulding's office, suggested that we work with Heather Moreno and John Bichon to have the county budget for and then update the plan. So that's what's happened in Napomo. I think this could start with something as simple as having our board president sign a letter that goes to our supervisors, and that's a little kind of a confusing term as well, because TCSD technically is just represented by John Bichon's district, but the Heather Moreno district abuts TCSD district. And so a lot of folks might say, well, she also represents Templeton because that word Templeton is bigger than TCSD. Some persons considered, out in halfway to Creston is still Templeton. That's what was suggested. If that makes sense to you, I could draft something and just put it on a future agenda and have the board authorize it's probably overkill, but have the board authorize the board president on the letter, at least get the ball rolling, and that could start the conversation with why do we think it's necessary. Or we can include in the letter some of the points of why we think it's necessary. It's kind of clear that these things are really old
3
documents.
times the size as we were.
Yeah, we were a really different community back in the days.
Do you know how old the previous iteration of Napomo's was?
I think it was the same era, some mid-90s kind of thing. It's not something that the county's on top of.
I would be in favor of that, board president.
I mean, do you think that's
Love that.
as good approach as any is?
Yeah.
Yeah, start there at least.
Yeah, I didn't know. We were trying to figure out, did it come like internally through the county system, like county planning wanted to do this, and then we start there. And we could obviously CC the county planning director and CAO and those kind of things, just so they know this is coming. But
Would LAFCO get involved at all? With that, because it's not any jurisdiction.
I don't
question,
think so.
no,
Maybe
it's
just
the
information.
community. So, and then what do they do with how do they come up with, well, what's the process of this community plan? What are they doing? Are they like, having workshops with the community?
Yes, there were a couple of those. There were a couple of workshops. They hired a consultant to develop a plan.
Oh, they did, okay, good, that's what we want. Hopefully we we have a say in it.
Well, we can include, I guess that's what I would want to include
Yes.
in our letter, is that because of the services we provide, we need to be an active participant, not just an observer, because, we're in the parks planning business and the trails planning business and the fire services business and all these other sort of, related to community growth.
Yeah.
And because we've been able to release additional water units and et cetera, that's, we're close to exhausting the water list.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, definitely, we will make sure that we act to participate. So that would be a critical point.
Anything else on those? The TCSD 50th anniversary.
This is your idea.
You're my area.
So that was another item off of our strategic plan, was to celebrate the 50th anniversary. 2026 is is the year, is 50 years after TCSD reformed.
What month technically?
So the vote took place in November of 2026, and we were officially a district in December. Yeah. Just by way of to food for discussion, actually Napomo just celebrated its 60th, and I remember what they did I remember vaguely did their 50th. We did some celebration, well, I think in several increments, but I was here during the 40th celebration. I think we did, we did something at one of the concerts in the park.
And we
Community
did,
night?
yeah, and we also had like magnets made, I think they would.
Oh, yeah, they were like emergencies, we mailed them out with utility bills and magnet, they had like a contact information for all the departments in the sheriff's office. That were sent out to all the utility accounts.
Yeah.
And
Staff got, didn't we do jackets?
We did jackets for staff and board members that said 1976 to 2016. Thought we did something at at one of the concerts,
I
maybe
think we did.
ice cream, maybe, is there? No, think we did. Anyway, maybe we ran out. I know I think I heard somebody say, we should have a float in the parade next year, recognize the,
I'm on that.
You're going to float.
Yeah, I'll do it.
So, this doesn't have to be resolved tonight, but was there work?
Ending September.
So what is it, what do the committee members have any ideas, and how do you think we should initiate this? My recollection was this was something we actually formed an ad hoc committee that kind of dealt with some of this back then, but this
I
committee.
tried to look for
I don't
stuff now and I
remember that.
Well, remember when the ad hoc committees didn't like have minutes and stuff, so that's what I didn't do. I was just thinking, I didn't remember David LaCarl being. I can't remember.
I looked through Lori's files to see if she had Victoria Islands, to see if she had notes or anything I could find.
Anyway, but
I think we had mugs.
no, that was the prior,
That,
that was maybe 25th anniversary. I still see they're still around.
they are still around.
24 years old.
I'm thinking of.
Wow.
I mean, I would like to see something more like a Main Street walk, you know what I mean? Like, get the businesses involved on Main Street and do something, like have an event, something like that.
The street fair kind of
Yeah,
thing, or?
yeah, I would think that would be
Especially
a better
around-
celebration.
Especially around the holidays. and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah, I would think that would be a better way to celebrate with the community.
Like, you think of maybe like a Christmas event, Christmas kind of an event, kind of like a.
I mean, yeah, some sort of, yeah, like kid friendly, family friendly, celebrate the history and like, encourage folks like, I would like to have participation from the business owners and see what their ideas about in terms of, I don't know, I don't wanna call it like a Christmas event.
Okay.
It seems like it would be a good idea to reach out to the chamber in one way or another
Yeah.
and see what opportunities there are. And something like you're talking
So it sounds like this is like a separate effort, and I think that maybe we need to have somebody lead that, set up like almost like a little committee that would include various other folks.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I mean, I would be
Yeah,
very
I mean,
interested.
like in that, when I came in from another town, they had, people like go up and out to different businesses, and different businesses had, like food to offer.
Yeah, like even
and
when we had the Halloween,
mingle and things
trick or
like-
treating
yeah.
on Main Street, stuff
If
like
you-
that.
And if you wanna incorporate like history, I think maybe involvement with the museum.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
museum, yeah.
The museum doesn't, so you're just throwing out, so we're just spitballing here.
Yeah,
So the museum does an event each fall called Founder's Day.
Yeah.
And 10 years ago, that used to be a street fair event that the museum was also involved in, and chamber led, and then, you know, when I,
Kind of got
it's, yeah, it's just now, at this point, it's just a museum event. It doesn't have broader involvement. But that used to be a street fair with vendors and,
Chili cook-off.
yeah, there was more to it.
Pies and.
And
You
there-
could bring something like that back.
yeah.
Yeah.
Rise on the Founder's Day.
Why did it go away? Just because the chamber moved?
Almost everything the chamber did was a struggle. It was a lot of work. I mean, so, you know, there was a conflict between the chamber and the museum at one point too, over the beer that was being
Oh,
served.
that's right.
Who held the ABC license, and Rotary Club was putting on the chili cook-off, and they wanted to be able to sell, I mean, everybody wants to be able to make money, and there became a conflict between who was gonna do what, between the Rotary Club, the chamber, and the museum. And the museum really didn't want the chamber to take over this event. They wanted it, they really like it the way it is.
They wanted it to be history
They
focused.
wanted it to be their event and not a bigger event. So, I don't know, that's just my recollection. I was on the chamber at the time this event was going on. I think it's probably been 8 or 9 years since that kind of an event took place. And since then, it's been kind of this smaller, just been kind of a chamber, kind of a museum open house
Mhm.
thing. They have more going on than that. I don't want to discount it, but it's limited to their property instead of more of a larger kind of street fair kind of thing. But when you said family party
Yeah.
thing, that's kind of what that was. The other thing that made that kind of tough is that event's always been celebrated. I think it used to be the first Sunday in November, and it occasionally rains.
Yeah, the weather
And
is tricky.
it just wasn't the very best time of year to do it. I don't remember when they did it this past, I think Founder's Day was this past year, but the museum the museum has a committee that puts on their celebration. I think if that thing were like that's because they try to align the date with the arrival of the first train to Templeton.
Okay,
Like,
which is.
It was in, I think in November, early November. The other thing that made it a challenge was when the feed and grain was was what it was until recently. They could not, they were very opposed to any street closures on Saturdays because they're busy on Saturdays.
Yeah.
And so it meant that this event had to be on a Sunday, and that was probably not the best option. Saturdays are way better, because we have a lot of kids out and about for soccer and everything else on Saturdays. Yep, he did, well, just the impact to the business. It's too great. I don't know if you guys wanna think about, or, wanna think about some things, then revisit this further at your next meeting. If
Yeah.
we're talking about like a next fall celebration, we do have.
With some time,
Yeah,
yeah.
you don't have to fine tune it now.
Yeah, maybe keep this on the.
Well, speaking of like the 50th anniversary, so our logo, the Templeton logo that we have, is that is it
No,
ever since the beginning?
no, I believe actually it's been updated twice, but the current logo was sometime in the 80s. And then the district actually adopted an alternate logo that's part of our website. It's not the official logo, it's more of a. Sure that has.
And then, like, I know some people have asked me, I guess we'll just keeping the logo as is then. Has.
I don't know, I would almost suggest that now would be the worst time to change it.
Yeah. So-
Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm just saying, people have
Yeah.
asked me if we.
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
We're just keeping it.
I mean, maybe in 10 years, it's,
Yeah,
That's wrong.
yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying, we're
Yeah.
just
Yeah, yeah,
answering
yeah,
the
yeah.
public, so it's like, we're not.
Yeah, the previous, I forget his name, the man who came to our last board.
Tim.
He was saying that the previous logo was like a cable car.
Well, there used to be a train,
Yeah.
a caboose in this
Uh-huh.
park. And actually that caboose was like the library at one point in time. For whatever reason, then sometimes pre-me got hauled away.
Yeah.
See if I can find
The caboose or
the
the.
letterhead in there.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
have,
I've never seen that before.
yeah, he was saying that, yeah, it was when it was at the downtown park. And the county took it away.
So.
That could have been a nice office for you.
It's interesting anyway.
For
Out
Paso,
there
it looks
conducting
like
it.
their Pioneer Day Parade is October 11th. And the Colony Days Parade is October 18th.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, the Founder's Day thing was always in early November.
Hmm.
There's always some other challenges with like Veterans Day falling in that time frame too. It was, yeah, I mean, Naveed and I were both on the chamber board for an overlapping period of time and I think I was like chair on that committee Founder's Day once or twice and it's a very challenging event because the time of year it fell, like multiple times there was rain.
Yeah, that's the hard part about the late fall.
Yeah, for an outdoor
For an outdoor
centric
event, right.
thing and, you know, or something that's more of a, yeah, it was kind of a bummer, but it was a, you know, it was because when, you know, coupled with the chamber's challenges and then COVID, we lost all of these events. The community, like we don't have, we used to have a beer festival, a wine festival, an Oktoberfest, yeah, the
Roses.
Bike and
Turkey
Roses,
trot.
the turkey, all of these events are gone.
Yeah, we had a lot of events. It was fun.
This was sad.
Yeah,
We used to do
I
a
was so busy.
Halloween event too,
Yeah.
with games and stuff and the fire department.
Yeah, we had a
Who-
lot of,
Was there one central organization who was like, was it the chamber?
well,
Or was it like
wine,
differing,
wines
like
and
each-
roses was Lions.
Well, for a little while, it was the Templeton Recreation Foundation, and for a little while, it was the Chamber of Commerce. It got passed around.
And then just disappeared. We, then the,
It's
yeah,
really tight.
Paso Robles Lions took over and just disappeared, but it was a big, bike ride and it was, yeah. It was fun.
And do we know why, the PRF sort of stepped away, just capacity issues?
I mean, Natalie could probably answer it better, but they went through a lot of events. There was a big, what was the wine dinner that was held? That was a big fundraiser or a big event.
Yeah,
for
we did
wine.
did a wine vendor or a dinner at the wineries and just
Not enough
having
people.
volunteers. You need
It's a lot of
volunteers.
work.
It's
Special
a lot
events
of
are a
work.
lot of work. Special events are a lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah, I was telling her, like, service clubs, they're just
Yeah.
dying breed right now. It's just like- they're-
So, you know, they're, like this group is trying to organize this big fundraiser here in September for the feed and grain and just. We're just getting kind of, I mean, they're doing it on short notice, so it's a ton of work, right? You know, for just, you know, just,
But they don't have a lot, last mention, a lot of information still up.
They have- there is tickets available now,
Okay, okay.
yeah, for the Friday night dinner. $250.
And then Saturday's the car show?
Sunday is, it's a Sunday. It's a Sunday is a street fair car show. So one of the challenges is that's Denim and Diamonds weekend. And that's a long-standing event.
Yeah.
And that's on Saturday. I don't know if actually that's why they chose to do the street fair on Sunday, but probably is a part of it.
Interested in being on an ad hoc committee?
For the 50th? Let me think about it. I'm not, I don't know. I don't know if I'm a party planner, but let me think about it.
If you wanna be a party goer, you gotta be a party planner, okay? Okay. Yeah, so maybe we can continue discussion
Yeah,
of that.
sure, absolutely.
All right, so future agenda items. We have.
Yeah, we have a
50th.
number of
Yeah.
the ones that were on here that will come back. We do expect that your next meeting, would be scheduled when the auditors have concluded their field work and can present some update. That's typically what we've held, when we've held this committee meeting is to coincide with the close of the field work. The auditors, we're using new, well, I
This
guess.
is my third year.
This is the third year already. Historically, the auditors were here for field work and we scheduled this committee at the conclusion of their field work and there was an in-person discussion about what they found and whatever. This group works a lot differently where most of the work is done remotely and they're not expecting to make another trip back. They were here, in May or June this year, maybe for half a day, maybe. Then they started with a meal and ended with a meal. It worked from 10 to 4 with lunch. Hey, I'm just kidding.
No, they weren't here till 1:30.
Okay, they were. Any-
But
Anyways, they were here, this group works mostly remote, and the last couple of years, they've they've had like a pretty good sense of where things were, they've scheduled a meeting with the committee and they've reported to the committee about what they found, which has meant it's been a pretty short report.
when their numbers come to rest.
So,
They'll meet with us virtually?
yes. So your next meeting, we will try to schedule around their availability to make sure that can happen. And we'll, as soon as we know that, we'll get that out to the committee members.
Do we know like ballpark?
October, that's what we,
Feel like with them.
Like it was later.
I can look at it.
There you go.
I wanted to say it was November, but I couldn't.
Just excited.
Lot of learning curve, you know. And the administrative part and all the OPEB stuff that we talked about and liability. It's crazy.
Justin's taking statistics, he's gonna figure stuff out.
Are you taking statistics?
I think it was a couple classes ago. Yeah, it's
Your
brutal.
next class needs to be actuarial assumption.
Organizational culture, that's what I'm going.
Yeah, I thought it was.
Out of strategic planning and into the culture.
Yeah,
Yeah, for my birthday, both
November
times.
13th, so, right, so it wasn't until the second.
Not great.
of November last time.
Not like till
Oh.
the middle of November.
Okay, okay. What is it now, August?
During our golden jubilee, November
Oh, yeah,
Is it,
yeah, is that what we're
uh,
calling it?
Veterans Day weekend, I don't know what it is. I don't know, it's a movie.
The
Oh, yeah,
are we?
The golden jubilee.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I already
because
started doing a logo in your.
I know, that's what they say to do.
Yeah.
On the time capsule,